Alright guys, Space Hub Colony Part 2. My brain hurts. I've been doing more math than I wanted to do on this, so my brain kind of hurts right now. Had one YouTube comment on my last video, and then just some questions from guildmates and friends about colony setup. So that's what I want to address, and this time I'm bringing math with me. I'm not just bringing geometry, like I'm not just giving you a city grid. I'm going to bring some math with me this time. We'll get into it. Talking with a good friend and mentor of mine, Lily, former guildmate but still close friend, and we have some theories, so I'm going to present that to you guys, okay? The real question for colony setup is how many goods buildings can I squeeze in here? Because we've all figured out that they print dark matter, right? So how many goods buildings can I actually squeeze in here? 8 is what I recommended in my initial video. That was challenged by people, so let's get into that. I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that 9 is actually impossible, and I'll break down the math for you on that. 9 is actually impossible. The good news is 12 is actually possible and probably even better. So that's a plot twist, but let's get into the math. Alright, this will be fun. Hang with me. Total squares available in a maximum Space Hub Colony. Mine is not maxed out yet, but the total available squares would be 656 minus your mandatory town hall, whatever it's called in Space Hub. I was actually joking with a teammate that I deleted mine to make room for other shit. So he tried deleting his. That was pretty funny. But yeah, you can't delete this one. That's it doesn't work like that. That leaves 631 squares to build on. Let's say we want 9 goods buildings, right? 8 is doable. We all know that. Let's say we want 9. That will consume 225 squares based on the most efficient goods producer based on population. The 4x5 and 5x4 variations are not population efficient, so we do need the most efficient population per tile on the goods side. Those 9 goods buildings will require 8,712 population, which is 19 houses of the 3x4 sort. And I have tried a few different variations of this. It's actually like 18.8 houses, but there's no way to get the population that you need or the space that you're confined to with a 4x4. So hang with me here. You need 8,712, and you can only plant 3x4 housing at that point. That consumes 228 squares, which is a demand of 10,949 for oxygen. I called it happiness just for abbreviation's sake, but that's a demand of 10,949 oxygen supply, which is 11.7 oxygen things. And I didn't even round this up to 12. I just called it 11.7 and assumed that you could maybe manipulate that with some 3x3 or some 3x4 oxygen, which I don't think is actually possible, but let's just roll with the 11.7. That would consume 187 squares with 2/3 of a building. That would consume 187 squares. So the total demand for the buildings that we've planted to achieve 9 goods buildings, the population to sustain that, which is mandatory. You can't plant those buildings without the population. And then the oxygen to sustain the population, which is optional. You could not feed them oxygen. That is optional, but the population to sustain 9 goods is mandatory. Total demand for this setup would be 640 squares out of our available 631. And this is based off the partial oxygen building. So 9 goods buildings with this happiness balance, this green oxygen metric, 9 goods buildings is mathematically impossible. Even with the most efficient housing, the most efficient oxygen, and the most efficient goods buildings. It's actually mathematically impossible, so we can lay that to rest now. But since we are only 9 squares away, I mean, the setup that we've just created demands 640 squares, right? We have 631 available. So the setup that we've created is only 9 squares different. So what's the obsession with the 25% metric on this life support? I guess that's the real question. It kind of depends on how much you trust math. I currently have the highest blue galaxy on server, and yesterday I got exactly 1 double out of the 15 that I collected off of a blue galaxy 134 or whatever it is. So the 75% chance that Inno gives you, and I mean, if you guys have been playing this game for long enough and you've played enough events where there's a 99% chance of winning the grand prize and a 1% chance of getting 5 rogues, by the end of the event, you'll have 600 rogues and no grand prize. That's how Inno math works. So, if you are willing to take that gamble, I would say that 9 goods buildings is actually pretty reasonable, and you would just fudge this 11.7 that depends on the most efficient oxygen supplier. You would find the other 9 tiles by using subpar oxygen, and you would be collecting everything at the yellow oxygen metric, so 10% chance of a quadruple. But in my experience with Inno and the way their algorithms work, I think that's actually a pretty healthy gamble. But let's get into the punchline of the video, right? I think 12 goods is actually possible and justified. There is no way. I ran a few different variations, different sizes of buildings. There is no way to get 10 goods buildings on the yellow oxygen scale. There's no way to get 10 goods buildings with a 10% chance of quadruple. I ran a few different variations of that, and you run out of squares. Ultimately, that is the challenge, is the real estate that you're working with. And you can't manipulate that. There's no finished special kit or quantum incursion expansion that you can add to this to change that variable. You're limited to the space that you have in the colony. So there is no way around that. It is not possible to have 10 goods buildings with 10% oxygen supply. But you can fit 12 goods buildings with 0 oxygen supply, just housing and goods. Which kind of brings it back to the Inno math question, which is, how much do you trust Inno math to actually give you the 25% possibility of a quadruple when you could just ditch oxygen altogether and plant an additional 4 goods buildings that are guaranteed, right, to give you 400 extra dark matter every day. And when you think about the map, there's only 2 or 3 tiles on the campaign map that are even worth doubling, right? If I do get a double, let's try it. Just for kicks and giggles, let's try it. If I even do get a double, and I have the green oxygen thing, right? So 25% chance. Let's see what I get, just for kicks and giggles. Oh, there's 9. Yep, that makes sense. Let's replace troops, because sometimes I think, I don't know, it's probably just superstition, but sometimes it seems like if I start with a fresh army or a different army, it'll magically, oh no, there's just 8. Okay. This one will quadruple. Guarantee it. Yeehaw! Oh my goodness, it's like I know these things. That's crazy. It's almost like I knew that would happen. And now I have no more, there's nothing left to farm on the map, right? So I did get a quadruple off of the one tile that provides 3 dark matter. So I gained 9 dark matter. I would make the argument that it's actually better just to have the 12 goods producers and totally forget about the oxygen metric. I would make that argument. The 400 guaranteed that you generate from having 12 goods buildings and just completely omitting the oxygen side of things, the extra 400 daily, I think, would compensate for the inconsistency on the map. Yes, sometimes I hit quadruple on the jackpot in the campaign map. Yes, that does happen sometimes. But as often as that happens, I would rather take the gamble on the guaranteed 400 extra dark matter from the colony itself. The downside with this proposal is that, first of all, ticket consumption would be extremely tight. So the 12 goods in a colony depends entirely on 4x3 housing, which is pretty low on ticket production. The 4x4 housing is not as population, doesn't provide as much population, and it's also on a bigger footprint, so not population efficient, but 4 times the output on tickets. So if you are inclined to hit the map, spend some diamonds to rush those productions, that system would not work for you. 13 goods is not possible, by the way. I did try that. I pushed the boundaries in every direction. I've done my due diligence. You can double check me if you want, but I have done my due diligence. The math this is what the math says. So the question is how much you believe in InnoMath that this 25% chance is actually 25% chance. That's the ultimate question. So bring it back full circle. The real question is 8 goods or 9 goods. How many can you actually fit in the colony? 8 was my preference to begin with because I think it has that balance where if I do have extra diamonds that I'm generating from GBG, or if I buy some diamonds or whatever, and I want to farm the map, I will be able to do that with the extra tickets that I'm generating from these 4x4 houses. If I depend completely on, like hypothetically, and my gut instinct was that 9 goods was possible. That was always my gut instinct, but that you would be forced to depend on this 4x3 housing and probably run out of tickets before you could even restart those 9 goods buildings. That was kind of my gut instinct. And now that I've done the math on it, 9 is actually mechanically impossible. So with that in mind, it doesn't really matter if you plant 5x5 or 4x5, as long as you have room for some of these 4x4 houses in order to farm the map. Or you could go the opposite direction and delete all of your oxygen supply, which, I don't know. I'm actually kind of considering it. Now that I've crunched the numbers, I'm actually considering, because you guys watched me hit the map, I got a bonus 9 dark matter tonight. I don't really know that that's worth the gamble on InnoMath, you know? So that is an option. But if you want to stick to the green oxygen metric, 8 is the maximum amount of goods buildings that you can print. So I don't think you need to be hyper fixated on whether it's 5x5 or 4x5. It doesn't really matter. Just plant 8 of them and make sure that you have 0 empty space in your city. Obviously, if you have empty squares, that's going to affect the calculations here. This is based on using every square possible. It doesn't matter if you plant 4x5 or 5x5. You're going to end up with the same 8 goods buildings and a combination of 4x4 and 4x3. Make sense? As I said before, 13 goods buildings is actually impossible with any combination. So I started with 13 5x5 goods buildings, and then the most efficient population provider. You can't fit all of that into a city grid. It's close. It's off by like 12 squares or something. It's close. But you can't adjust that to like 10 5x5 goods and 3 4x5 goods. Use the extra space to plan another population provider. You just can't reconcile that. So 12 is the absolute most that you can provide with zero oxygen supply. 12 is the most goods buildings that you will be able to plant. 9 is the only number that you'll be able to plant with the 110% metric on oxygen. 9 is the only number that you'll be able to do that. And 8 is the only number that you'll be able to, is the maximum number, I should say, that you'll be able to have full oxygen support. So, hope that clears up some questions for you Space Hub nerds. And if you find a way to plant number 10 with full oxygen, call me out, post a video. I would love to get schooled. I'll talk to you later, guys.